Ethan had always thought of himself as unlucky. Back on Earth, nothing in his life had gone according to plan. He was neither rich nor important, and he spent most of his years drifting from one small job to another. When he bought an old cargo ship at a cheap auction, he told himself it was a new beginning. He would travel between colonies, deliver supplies, and finally have the freedom he had always wanted. But the ship was more rust than steel, and freedom, it turned out, came with constant danger. The engine gave out in the middle of a quiet sector, far away from any main travel lanes. At first he thought it was a small malfunction, something he could fix if given enough time. But the ship shook, alarms rang, and lights dimmed as if the vessel itself was taking its last breath. Ethan tried to steer it toward the nearest planet, hoping at least for a crash that he could survive. He strapped himself into the pilot chair and whispered to himself, "Hold together, just a little longer." The ship did not listen. It burned through the thin atmosphere of the alien world, metal tearing and screeching. Ethan closed his eyes when the ground rushed up at him. By some miracle, the cargo ship did not explode on impact. Instead, it skidded across hard soil and finally came to rest near a stretch of forest. Smoke hissed from broken panels. Ethan coughed, unbuckled himself, and staggered out. The planet's air was breathable, though heavy. Strange purple-leafed trees surrounded him, their branches twisting like long arms. The ground was soft with moss that shimmered faintly in the light of two suns above. Ethan checked his body for wounds. Some bruises, a small cut on his forehead, but he was alive. That was enough for now. Still, he knew survival would not be simple. He had no working ship, no communication device strong enough to reach distant colonies. If he was lucky, maybe locals lived here. If unlucky, he had just landed on a world that wanted nothing to do with humans. Ethan scavenged what supplies he could, a half-broken pack, some ration bars, and a small survival tool that worked both as a knife and a multi-tool. He set out into the forest, carefully marking his path so he could find his way back. Hours passed. The forest sang with bird-like cries and the buzz of insects he did not recognize. His legs ached, and hunger clawed at his stomach. Then he heard something unexpected. A laugh. High, clear, and childlike. Ethan froze. He turned, slowly toward the sound, half afraid he was imagining things. But then he saw her. A little alien girl stood a short distance away, no taller than his waist. Her skin was pale blue with faint silver lines across her cheeks, as if drawn by nature's brush. She wore a simple dress of woven fibers, and her large eyes shimmered like green glass. In her hands she carried a basket filled with bright fruits. She looked at Ethan not with fear, but with curiosity. For a long moment, neither moved. Ethan raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "Hello," he said softly. His voice cracked with thirst and exhaustion. The girl tilted her head, then stepped closer. Her eyes studied his face, his clothes, and the small cut on his forehead. Then, in surprisingly clear words, she spoke. "You are lonely?" Ethan blinked, unsure he had heard right. "What?" She pointed at him, then hugged her basket to her chest. "Are you lonely?" she repeated, her voice filled with innocent seriousness. Ethan let out a weak laugh. I guess I am." The girl's expression brightened. She walked closer until she stood right in front of him. Then she said something that made Ethan forget his exhaustion, his crash, and even the pain in his body. "Then marry my mom. She's kindest." For a moment, Ethan thought the crash had rattled his mind more than he realized. He blinked down at the little girl, wondering if this was some kind of trick. But her eyes were wide and honest, her tone completely sincere. He crouched slowly, bringing himself closer to her level. "Why would you say something like that?" he asked carefully. The girl shrugged as if the answer were obvious. "You look sad. My mom is kindest. She makes everyone better. She can make you better, too." Ethan felt something stir in his chest, something he had not felt in a long time. Warmth. This child, who knew nothing about him, who should have been afraid of a stranger falling from the sky, was instead offering him comfort, It was so simple, so pure that he had no words. He smiled faintly. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she answered proudly, as if her name was something important. "Well, Lyra," Ethan said, standing again though his legs trembled. "Could you take me to your mom?" She nodded quickly and reached out her small hand, as if it was the most natural thing in the world to guide a lost human. Ethan hesitated only a second before taking it. Her skin was cool, soft and real, not a dream. They walked together through the forest. Lyra skipped happily, humming a tune while Ethan stumbled behind, still trying to understand what had just happened. Soon the forest opened into a wide valley where small homes stood, built from stone and wood. Smoke rose from chimneys. People moved about, carrying tools, tending fires, and talking in low voices. As they entered the settlement, silence fell. The villagers stopped what they were doing and turned their eyes toward Ethan. Their faces were similar to Lyra's, with pale blue skin and shimmering eyes, but their expressions carried suspicion. Hands reached for tools that could be used as weapons. Children were pulled back behind parents. Lyra, however, lifted her hand high and called out, "I found him. He is lonely. He needs Mom." The villagers murmured, confused and cautious. Ethan felt every stare like a weight pressing down on him. He swallowed hard, reminding himself not to move too fast or appear threatening. Then, through the crowd, a woman appeared. She was tall, graceful, and carried herself with quiet strength. Her hair, dark and braided with silver threads, fell across her shoulders. She wore simple clothes, but her presence made the villagers step aside with respect. Her eyes, green, like Lyra's but deeper, wiser, fixed on Ethan. Lyra ran to her and tugged on her hand. "Mom, he is lonely. Marry him. You are kindest." The woman froze, her expression caught between surprise and disbelief. Slowly, her gaze shifted from her daughter to the human stranger who stood, tired and bruised, at the edge of her people. Ethan could not speak. All he could do was bow his head slightly, both in greeting and in silent hope that he would not be cast out. The woman studied him for a long, heavy moment. Then, in a voice that carried both calm and caution, she asked, "Who are you, human, and why have you come to my world?" Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but the words caught in his throat. The truth was simple. He had not come here by choice. And yet, standing there in front of this woman and her daughter, he felt as if fate had guided him to this exact place. Ethan stood at the edge of the alien village, feeling the weight of every eye fixed on him. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, and his shipwrecked body screamed for rest. Yet he remained still, not wanting to make any sudden move that could make him seem dangerous. The little girl, Lyra, clung to his hand as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked up at her mother, her words still echoing in the air. "He is lonely. Marry him. You are kindest." The villagers whispered to one another, their voices low but sharp. Words carried suspicion. He could not understand all of their language, but he understood the tone. Outsider, danger, stranger. The woman, Lyra's mother, stepped forward. She carried herself with quiet strength, the kind of strength earned by years of responsibility. Her eyes studied Ethan with caution, yet not cruelty. Finally, she spoke. "You are human. Why are you here?" Ethan swallowed, his throat dry. "I crashed. My ship failed. I didn't come by choice. I just survived." A ripple of sound moved through the crowd. Some muttered disbelief, others scoffed. Humans were rare here, maybe even unheard of. The woman tilted her head slightly. "You are far from your kind. What do you want from us?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't want to harm anyone, I just need help. A place to rest. Maybe some food. Then I'll find a way to fix my ship. Or move on." Before the woman could reply, Lyra tugged at her hand again. "Mom, he is good. I can tell." Her bright eyes turned up to Ethan with trust that seemed too large for her small frame. He can stay with us. Please. The mother sighed, torn between her daughter's innocence and the duty she owed her people. At last she gave a short nod. He may stay for now, but he will be watched. The villagers did not like the decision. Their narrowed eyes followed Ethan as he was led through the small settlement. The homes were made of stone and clay, built in circles around a wide communal fire pit. Children peeked from behind doorways. Men and women carried tools that could become weapons if he made a wrong step. Ethan felt every heartbeat pounding in his ears. Lyra's mother brought him to a modest home near the edge of the village. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and warm firewood. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of powders and dried plants. Ethan realized then, she was a healer. Her hands carried not just strength but skill to mend. She gestured for him to sit on a wooden stool. Without a word, she took a cloth and dipped it in water from a clay bowl. Then she cleaned the cut on his forehead with gentle, practiced movements. Ethan winced at the sting, but her touch was steady, firm. "You are lucky," she said softly. "A crash like that should have killed you." Ethan gave a small smile. "Luck and we've never been friends, but maybe this time he felt sorry for me." The woman did not laugh, though her eyes softened for a moment. Lyra climbed onto Ethan's knee without asking, still holding her basket of fruits. She offered him one, a round fruit with golden skin. "Here, eat. It will make you strong." Ethan hesitated, but the girl's eager face was impossible to refuse. He took a bite. The fruit was sweet, with juice that ran down his chin. He hadn't tasted anything so fresh in months. "Thank you, Lyra," he said warmly. She grinned. "See, Mom? He is good." The healer shook her head but allowed her daughter's joy. "Do not decide a man's heart so quickly, child." She turned to Ethan. "My name is Solari. If you stay here, you must know, our people have suffered from outsiders before. We cannot afford to trust easily." "I understand," Ethan replied. "I don't expect trust, just a chance." The following days were filled with uneasy balance. Ethan stayed near Solari's home, resting and recovering strength. But he could not ignore the stares whenever he stepped outside. Villagers watched him as though waiting for him to make a mistake. Some whispered that he should leave. Others avoided him altogether. Yet Ethan refused to be only a burden. On the third morning, he saw a group of men struggling with broken tools near the farming fields. Their plows, made of wood and stone, cracked under the weight of hard soil. Ethan stepped forward. "May I help?" he asked carefully. The men frowned. One crossed his arms. "What does a human know of our tools?" Ethan knelt beside the plow, running his fingers over the broken joint. He pulled out his survival tool from his belt, unfolding it into a small wrench. With a few adjustments and tightening of the wood with metal scraps he had salvaged, the plow held firm again. The men exchanged looks of surprise. Ethan stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "It's not perfect, but it will work for now." They tested it. The plow cut into the soil smoother than before. Slowly, one of the men gave a nod. "Useful," he admitted. Word spread. The human could fix things. Soon others came quietly. Someone with a broken water channel pipe, another with a cooking pot that had cracked. Ethan worked patiently, using what little he had, showing them techniques he learned during his travels. It wasn't much, but it mattered. Solari noticed too. Each evening, when Ethan returned, tired but satisfied, she would watch him with guarded curiosity. Lyra, of course, followed him everywhere, chattering about the village, asking endless questions about Earth. "Do humans also have two suns? Do your trees glow? Do you eat fruit like this?" Ethan laughed at her innocent wonder, answering, as best as he could. One night, as the firelight flickered in Solari's home, Ethan asked the question that had rested in his mind since he arrived. "Why did Lyra say what she said? About you being kindest?" Solari paused, stirring a pot of herbs. For a long moment she did not answer. Finally, she said, "Children see the world in simple colors. They believe kindness can heal all things. Perhaps she only wished to give you comfort." Ethan smiled faintly. Well, it worked. Solari's eyes met his, soft yet unreadable. She did not reply, but the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was gentle, but trust was fragile. Some villagers still spoke against him. "He will bring danger," they warned. "Humans always take, never give." Ethan felt the weight of their suspicion, but he also felt something else growing, an invisible thread tying him to this place. Every time Lyra tugged his hand, every time Solari let her calm voice guide him, he felt less like an outsider. One evening, as the sky turned deep violet and the two suns dipped low, Ethan stood outside Solari's home. Lyra leaned against him, already drifting to sleep. Solari stepped out, folding her arms. "You are changing things," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her unsure. "Is that bad?" She shook her head slowly. "It is dangerous. But sometimes dangerous things are the ones that bring life." Ethan did not fully understand her words, but he felt them settle deep in his chest. For the first time in years, he was not drifting alone in the universe. He was part of something, fragile though it was, and though he did not yet know it, that fragile bond was about to be tested in ways none of them expected. Ethan had begun to feel the faint stirrings of belonging. The villagers no longer looked at him only with suspicion. Some greeted him with cautious nods, others brought him broken tools to mend. He worked tirelessly, not only to repay their kindness, but also to prove that he was not a burden. Lyra followed him everywhere, chattering endlessly about her people's customs, their food, and their games. Solari, though still guarded, had softened. Her eyes lingered on Ethan a little longer each evening, as if she was weighing a truth she was not yet ready to say aloud. But peace was fragile on this world. One night, the village fire burned low, and the people gathered in uneasy silence. A scout had returned with urgent news. Raiders were coming. These were no strangers. Bands of ruthless scavengers who moved from settlement to settlement, taking food, tools, and sometimes lives. They were feared across the land. The villagers panicked. Mothers pulled their children close. Men sharpened. What few weapons they had, mostly farming tools, turned into crude spears. The elder of the village spoke in a heavy voice. "We do not have the strength to resist them. If they come, we will lose much." Ethan listened, his jaw tightening. He had seen raiders before, back on distant colonies where law was weak. He knew what such people were capable of. He could not stand by. "I'll help you fight them," he said firmly. The room fell into silence. Heads turned, eyes narrowing at the human. One villager sneered. "Fight them. What can one outsider do? You will bring more trouble." Ethan met his gaze. "I've faced men like this before. I may not be strong like you, but I know how to prepare. I know how to think like them." Solari, standing at the edge of the crowd, studied him with a mix of worry and hope. Lyra, who had been clutching her mother's hand, piped up in her innocent voice. "He can help. He fixed the tools. He can fix this too." Her words brought uneasy laughter, but the elder finally spoke. "Human, you may try, but if you fail, it is our people who will pay the price." Ethan nodded. "Then we won't fail." The next morning, Ethan set to work. He walked the edge of the village, studying the terrain. The homes were built in a circle, with the communal fire at the center. To the north stretched open fields, to the south thick forest. He saw weak points, places raiders would likely attack. He called the men and women together, speaking with steady authority. "You don't need to fight like warriors. You just need to be smarter than them." He showed them how to build simple barricades from wood and stone, creating choke points that would slow the raiders. He helped them dig shallow trenches at the edges of the fields, camouflaging them with branches. He crafted alarms, strings tied with bells and metal scraps, that would sound if someone crossed them. At first, the villagers grumbled. Why do this? They are too many. But as they worked, they began to see sense in his ideas. The defenses gave them confidence, a sense of control they had not felt before. Scifi watched him from the sidelines, sometimes helping, sometimes simply studying. At one point, she approached quietly as he adjusted a barricade. "You speak as if you have done this before," she said softly. Ethan nodded, his eyes distant. "On colonies far from Earth, I saw raiders take whole towns. I swore if I ever had the chance, I would not let it happen again." Scifi's gaze softened, though she said nothing more. The day of the raid came with smoke on the horizon. The raiders arrived on rough vehicles, their engines growling. They carried weapons made of scavenged metal and fire. Their leader, a tall figure draped in leather and bone, sneered at the village as if it was nothing more than prey. The villagers trembled but held their ground behind the barricades. Ethan stood among them, his heart pounding. He had no real weapon, only a sharpened spear he had fashioned from a farming tool. Yet he stood firm. The raiders charged. The ground thundered under their feet. But as they crossed the fields, the first trench swallowed 2 of them, sending their weapons scattering. Alarms rang as others tripped the strings, alerting the defenders. Barricades forced the raiders into narrow paths where villagers, emboldened by Ethan's plans, struck with spears and stones. Ethan fought at the front, his movements clumsy but desperate. He blocked a swing with his spear, shoved an attacker back and barely ducked a blow aimed at his head. He was no warrior, but his determination was unshakable. When one raider broke through the line and rushed toward the inner homes, Lyra screamed. Ethan saw her small figure frozen in terror near the fire pit. Without hesitation, he ran. He threw himself between the raider and the child, raising his arms. The blow struck his shoulder, pain exploding through him, but he did not fall. He swung his spear with all his strength, knocking the raider back long enough for others to swarm, and drag the attacker away. Lyra clung to him, sobbing into his chest. Ethan winced at the pain in his shoulder but wrapped one arm around her protectively. "It's all right. I've got you," he whispered. The villagers saw. They saw a human, battered and bleeding, willing to throw himself into danger for a child who was not his own. Something shifted in that moment. Suspicion turned to respect. The fight raged on, but the defenses held. One by one, the raiders fell back, their leader snarling in frustration. Finally, with losses mounting and no easy victory in sight, the raiders retreated into the smoke and dust, their vehicles fading into the distance. The village stood in silence, the only sound the crackle of fires and the heavy breaths of survivors. Then cheers erupted, voices raised in triumph. They had stood together. They had survived. Ethan, however, could barely stand. His shoulder throbbed, his body ached, and exhaustion weighed him down. Scifi rushed to him, her healer's hands already at work. "You fool," she scolded softly, though her voice trembled. "Throwing yourself into danger like that." Ethan managed a tired smile. Couldn't let her get hurt. He glanced at Lyra, who was still holding his hand tightly, her wide eyes filled with gratitude and love. Scifi pressed her hand gently to his wound, her touch both firm and tender. "You risked your life for her. For all of us." "I told you," Ethan said, his voice faint. "I don't want to take. I want to give. Maybe I finally found something worth giving to." Scifi's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no wall of caution between them. Only quiet understanding. That night, the villagers gathered around the great fire. Food was shared, songs were sung, and the air carried a sense of victory. Ethan sat near the flames, his arm bandaged, his body aching, but his heart, strangely, light. Lyra leaned against him, humming softly while Scifi tended the fire. The elder stood and raised his voice. "Today we lived because of him, the outsider. He fought not as a stranger but as one of us." The villagers cheered. For the first time, Ethan felt the sound not as distant noise but as acceptance. Scifi glanced at him from across the fire, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Ethan returned it, a silent promise hanging in the air between them. He had come to this world by accident, but maybe, just maybe, he was meant to stay. The night after the raid felt different. For the first time since Ethan had stumbled into the village, the people did not look at him with suspicion. They looked at him with respect. Children whispered excitedly about the way he had stood against the raiders. Men nodded to him when they passed. Women offered him food with gratitude instead of caution. But Ethan was not thinking about glory or respect. He was thinking about the warmth of the small hand that had clung to his during the fight, and about the quiet strength of Solari's eyes as she bound his wounds. Ethan's shoulder still ached in the days that followed. Solari insisted he rest, though he was not one to sit idle. She prepared poultices from her herbs, wrapping them with care. Her hands were steady, but sometimes her gaze lingered on him, as though she wanted to say more than her healer's duty allowed. "You heal faster than I expected," she said one evening, adjusting the bandage. Ethan chuckled softly. "Humans are stubborn. We don't like to give up." Solari's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Stubbornness can be a gift, or a curse." Lyra, who sat nearby with her basket of fruits, interrupted with her usual innocence. "He is not cursed, Mom. He is good, I told you." Ethan laughed, though Solari shook her head at her daughter's words. Yet she did not deny them. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan became part of the village's rhythm. He helped mend tools, reinforced the defenses, and even worked alongside the farmers in the fields. He was clumsy at first, unused to their ways, but he learned quickly. The villagers began to trust his presence, even if some still watched him, with caution. At night, the three of them, Solari, Lyra, and Ethan, would often sit together by the small fire inside their home. Solari would share stories of her people's past, tales of ancestors who had crossed mountains and rivers to settle in this valley. Lyra would fall asleep halfway through, curled against Ethan's side, as though she had known him forever. Ting was in those quiet evenings that Ethan felt something he had not felt in years: peace. The loneliness that had always followed him, even back on Earth, began to fade. In its place grew a fragile sense of belonging. One afternoon, as Ethan worked on repairing a cracked water pot, Solari approached him. Her face was serious. "You should know something," she said quietly. Ethan set the pot aside and gave her his full attention. "What is it?" "Before you came, this village had little hope. The raiders took from us often. Many believed we would not survive another season." Her eyes softened. "But when you stood with us, everything changed. The people see you now not as a stranger, but as one of us." Ethan's chest tightened at her words. "I didn't do it for respect. I did it because I couldn't stand to see them hurt, to see you and Lyra hurt." Solari looked at him steadily, as though weighing the truth of his words. Then she gave a slow nod. "My daughter was right, it seems. You are good." The simple statement warmed him more than any fire. Lyra, of course, continued to remind everyone of her original words. Whenever Ethan walked with her through the village, she would announce boldly, "This is the man who will marry my mom." The villagers laughed, some shaking their heads in amusement. Ethan would blush, while Solari sighed in exasperation. Evening after Lyra had fallen asleep, Ethan sat outside under the twin moons. Solari joined him, her expression thoughtful. "You should not encourage her words," she said softly. "Children speak without knowing what such things mean." Ethan smiled faintly. "I don't encourage her, but I can't say I dislike them either." Solari looked at him sharply as though searching his eyes for deception. Finding none, she lowered her gaze. "You are human. I am not. Such bonds, they are not simple." "I know," Ethan replied. "But simple or not, sometimes life doesn't ask us what we want. It just places people in our path. People who matter." Silence fell between them, but it was not heavy. It was filled with unspoken feelings neither dared to name. The next day brought a test of another kind. A group of villagers approached Solari's home. They carried gifts, baskets of grain, jars of herbs, tools. They set them before Ethan. "You fought for us," the elder said. "You bled for us. These are small tokens of thanks." Ethan stood awkwardly, unsure how to respond. "I don't need gifts," he said. "I only did what anyone should have done." But the elder shook his head. "Not anyone. You. You chose to stand with us when you could have fled." Solari watched from the doorway, her eyes filled with quiet pride. Life in the village grew easier. Ethan laughed more, worked harder, and even began to learn their language better. The children followed him eagerly, asking about Earth. He told them stories of oceans so vast they seemed endless, of mountains covered in snow, of birds that sang at sunrise. Their eyes sparkled with wonder. At night, when the village quieted, Ethan often sat with Solari after Lyra had gone to bed. They spoke of small things: farming, the stars, the meaning of family. Sometimes their hands brushed as they passed each other bowls or tools. Each touch lingered a little longer than it needed to. But despite the peace, Ethan knew challenges remained. One evening, Solari voiced what he had been thinking. "The raiders will come again," she said. "They always do, and worse forces may hear of you, a human among us. They may see it as weakness, or as opportunity." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then we'll be ready. We'll make this place stronger than before." Solari studied him, her voice softening. "You speak as if you are no longer a visitor." Ethan looked at her, then at the sleeping form of Lyra nearby. He smiled gently. "Maybe I'm not." That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling of Solari's home. He thought about his life before, the endless drifting, the loneliness that had followed him from world to world, and now, here, in a place he had never meant to find, he felt something he had thought lost forever: purpose. He turned his head toward Lyra, who slept peacefully, and toward Solari, who sat quietly by. The fire lost in thought. A small, quiet truth settled into his heart. This was not just a place to survive. This was a place to belong. The days after the raid passed quietly. The village slowly healed, though scars remained on both walls and hearts. Ethan worked alongside the villagers to strengthen the defenses, repair broken homes, and rebuild what had been lost. Each day, he felt more a part of them, as though the valley itself had chosen to accept him. But peace never lasted long in this world. One morning, while Ethan was repairing a damaged water channel near the fields, a sound reached the village from above. The deep hum of engines. The people froze, looking up at the sky. Through the purple leaves, streaks of light appeared. Ships descended, sleek and sharp, marked with the emblems of an outer world patrol. Ethan's heart sank. He recognized the design, human-built. The ships landed just beyond the village. Armed officers stepped out, their armor shining, their weapons advanced compared to anything the villagers owned. Their leader, a tall man with a voice of command, called out, "We have come for the human. He does not belong here. Hand him over and no harm will come to your settlement." The villagers gasped. Their eyes turned toward Ethan. Fear rippled through them. Some whispered, "If they want him, we should let him go." Others shook their heads, remembering the night he had fought for them. Ethan stepped forward, raising his hands. His voice carried across the silence. "I'll go. Don't harm them. This is my fault, not theirs." Lyra's cry broke the air. She ran to him, clutching his hand tightly. "No, you can't go. You are family now. You promised you would stay." Ethan knelt beside her, his heart twisting. "Lyra, I didn't promise, I only hoped. But sometimes life doesn't give us what we want." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then marry my mom. If you marry my mom, you have to stay. That's the rule." The officers looked on with impatience, their weapons still raised. But the villagers were no longer silent. Solari stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "This man has fought for us, bled for us, and stood as one of us. If you take him, you take one of our own." The leader frowned. He is human. He belongs to us. Scifi shook her head. No. He belongs where his heart is. The villagers rallied behind her. He is one of us, they shouted. He stays. The officers hesitated. They had not expected resistance from a small settlement. The leader's eyes narrowed as he studied Ethan. Do you choose them human? Or will you return to your kind? Ethan felt the weight of the choice pressing on him. For most of his life he had drifted, never belonging anywhere. Now he stood at the edge of two worlds, the one of his birth, filled with endless wandering, and the one he had stumbled into by chance, a world that had given him purpose, family, and something he had thought he would never find again. Love. He looked at Lyra, who clung to him with desperate hope. He looked at Scifi, whose steady eyes held both strength and fear. Then he turned back to the officers. I choose here, he said firmly. I choose them. The words rang like iron in the air. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. The leader scowled. So be it. But do not expect us to return if raiders come again. You will not have human protection. Ethan stood tall, despite the ache in his shoulder and the dirt on his clothes. I don't need your protection. I have theirs and they have mine. For a long moment it seemed the officers might press the issue. But finally, with a curt gesture, the leader turned back toward his ship. Very well. He is your problem. Now. The ships lifted into the sky, leaving only the hush of the wind behind. The villagers erupted in cheers. Children danced around the fire pit. Men and women clasped Ethan's shoulders in thanks. He had not only fought for them, he had chosen them. Scifi stood quietly at his side, her eyes glistening. Lyra still clung to him, but now her tears were mixed with joy. You stayed, she whispered. You really stayed. Ethan smiled, softly. I told you, I don't want to drift anymore. This is home now. Scifi's voice trembled, though it was filled with warmth. Then you are truly one of us. Lyra, beaming with pride, looked between them. See? I told you both. He should marry you, Mom. Now it is true. The villagers laughed at the child's boldness, but none disagreed. Ethan felt heat rise to his face. He looked at Scifi, unsure of what to say. But she met his gaze with steady eyes. Perhaps, she said softly. Children sometimes see truths that adults fear to name. Ethan's breath caught. He had no answer, only a smile that carried more than words. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Ethan worked side by side with the villagers, not as an outsider, but as one of them. He strengthened defenses, helped plant fields, and taught what little he knew of human tools and methods. The villagers in turn taught him their ways, their songs, their traditions, their stories. At night, when the fires burned low, Ethan often sat beside Scifi. Their hands would sometimes touch, not by accident anymore. Lyra would curl up between them, smiling even in her sleep, as if she had known all along what destiny had planned. Ethan still remembered the loneliness of his old life. But now, when he looked at the stars, he no longer felt like a man drifting through endless space. He felt like a man who had found his place, his family, his purpose, his home, and it had all begun with the simple, innocent words of a little girl. Are you lonely? Then marry my mom. She's kindest. Those words had changed him forever.